Hey! Ha-ha! I am victorious! Ha 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 ha! Bam! Emerald. Alright, let's go live. We got we're a little bit early here to go live, but that's fine. Alright, we got us up and running. Up and her. Alright, guys. Looking good. Looking live. Greetings, adventurers. Looks like we got this bad boy working, so I am grateful. Alright, everyone, so please let me know, shout out here, kind of where you're at, where you're from, and kind of your experience with D&D. I've got an active poll here. It would only let me do 4 for the poll. So I've got an active poll there going on with favorite class. The 4 basics. You know, you got the healer, the wizard, the fighter, and the rogue. So yeah, right now just getting into it, kind of the D&D Q&A session. I've had quite a bit of people asking, you know, some questions when I've done streams and just also when I've been doing D&D. So that's what I'm looking to do right now. So once we get people in here, happy to answer any questions. But yeah, I'll kind of just go into this here. I've got with me, I have all the books, but I've got with me Volo's Guide. So I'm going to crack into this here while I'm waiting. The minute anyone signs in, give me a shout out, type on there, ask me some questions. But I'm going to keep moving forward here. So, some things about the Volo's Guide here. If you haven't looked at this book, it's got a lot of the kind of out there monsters to look at. So let us cover this here. So we've got monster lore. It starts out with beholders, bad dreams come true. And what it basically does is it gives you everything on beholders. It talks about the birth of a beholder, why they live solitary, beholder hives, death tyrants, beholder kin. Physical characteristics. So these are basically, if you want to make a beholder or a beholder BBEG, but you're not really sure where to start, but you want to do something fun, you've got here all kinds of different things for the beholders. So you've got body diameter, skin color, skin texture, beholder eye color, beholder eye size, beholder iris shape, beholder eye stalk texture, eye stalk shape, mouth shape and size, teeth shape, and then how to roleplay them. Just like with a hero, you've got personality traits, ideals, and bonds, and flaws. So, since I'm sitting here and I'm waiting, we're gonna do this. So, I've got here my trusty roller box and my dice. I've got lots of dice, as anyone in D&D does. But we're going to roll my lucky metal ones here. They're always good. So, let's see here. 2d6. There we go. This will be the body diameter. So I rolled here. I got a 2 and a 3. I'll show it to you there. I don't know if you can see it, but 2 and a 3. So that means total is 5, He has a 5-foot diameter for his body. Let's go with skin color. I'm going to roll a D12 on. Here we go, D12. 6. Pinkish. Pinkish beholder. I like it. All right. And someone posted here about praying, which is good. But unfortunately, it doesn't have anything to do with D&D, so I'm going to unfortunately delete that. Appreciate, Christian beliefs. I am a Christian myself as well, but I'm not doing that here. This is D&D, and we're rolling for a beholder, so definitely put some comments there about beholders. If you don't know what a beholder is, let me tell you, it's a horrifying creature. All right, so we rolled. It's going to be a 5-foot body diameter, pinkish skin color. Let's see his skin texture. We're going to roll a D10 here. If you're wondering what a D10 is, it is this one. Okay? Here we go. An 8. All right, that is purple blue. Oh, wait, wrong one. Skin texture. On 8. Smooth. He's got smooth pink skin. Maybe it's going to be a she, but it doesn't have to be, I guess, with pink. Let's subvert the powers that be, and we'll make it a male pink beholder, right? That way people won't assume. Beholder eye color. D10 again. Where is my D10? D10, where did you go? I just used you. There it is. All right, here we go. 1. Red. Red eyes, pink smooth skin, iris shape. For that, we're going to use the D20. 12. All right, slit. Oh, it's got a slit iris. Interesting. And eye size. Roll once for central eye and once for all the smaller eyes. And I guess you determine how many other eyes they have here. Ugh. Most of them have like 10 eye stalks, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, always 10. So there you go. So 2d6s, huh? Ooh, nice. Hey, you're my witness here. 2 6s. All right, so we got 150% normal. So he has an eye 150% bigger on the center. And then for all the smaller eyes, normal. So normal eyes, pink, smooth with a cat basically iris. The eye stalk texture, 1d6, huh? 5, segmented, aka insectile. And D4. D4 is going to be this guy, the caltrop triangle, right? 2. We got thin and short. So he's got thin and short eye stalks that are segmented, insectile. A big eye, red. The eye is red, cat-like, and a smooth skin, purple skin color. Finally, you have the mouth shape and size and the teeth size, which is a D6. So that is normal, okay. And then a D10 again. 2. thick and pointed. So normal mouth that are thick and pointed. So kind of like, I guess it's a crocodile or alligator teeth, like the thicker teeth. All right. So that would be our beholder. So maybe I'll draw that later. All right, and then we would roll personality, ideal, bonds, and flaws. So here we go. I'm going to roll all 4 at once here. All right, so his personality trait, I am weary of frequent interruptions. His ideal is going to be stability, lawful. I must maintain the current balance of power in the region. Bonds, I miss the kinship of my identical twin who disappeared years ago. Interesting. This is a sentimental beholder. And flaw, I often take out my frustration on my minions. And finally the name. Here we go, the big one. Ten, Nagish. Alright, so we just rolled and created the beholder using Volo's guide there. So here we go. Shout out to Nagish. Pink, smooth-skinned beholder, 5 feet in diameter, with a larger than normal cat-like eye, smaller eye stalks are segmented and shorter. His mouth gleams with thick, pointed teeth. I go to spell check because I put a J on thick and it's like Thijik, and I'm like, no. Boom. So there is Nagish, the one we rolled for. Pink smooth skin beholder, 5 feet in diameter. Larger than normal red cat-like eye with smaller eye stalks that are segmented and shorter. His mouth gleams with thick pointed teeth. And if they were to investigate further or trying to figure out more about him, they would learn, hey, look at this. He kind of wants to keep the balance of power here. He had a twin that he lost that he misses, and he kind of takes things out on his minions. And he does not like frequent interruptions. So that's just a little thing right there. You've got battle tactics on how the beholder fights, how to use them, how to use traps, how to use their different rays, how to set up their layers. I mean, you can see here kind of a cool example for a beholder layer. So really, really cool. Next thing in there, they've got stuff on giants. Same thing. How to roleplay a giant. Ideals. Lifespans. Giant tongue with some fun giant words. You got gnolls. How gnolls work. Goblins. Hobgoblins. Types of hags. Kobolds. UNT, Mind Flayers. And then they did add in Asimir, Kenku, Goliaths, Furbolgs, Lizard Folks, Tabaxi, Tritons, as far as for player characters. And UNT. So tons of cool stuff in here. I definitely recommend it. It's one of my favorite books. So that's just an example of some of the stuff you can do. There are a lot of these in other books too on kind of how to build a bad guy. So that was just an example for a beholder as a BBEG. I keep using that term, by the way. That basically means big bad evil guy. It's basically the end boss, the Sauron of the campaign. So yeah, let me know if you got any questions, if there's been some things you've been trying to do. I'll answer some common ones. Just waiting for questions to pop up in the chat. One of the common ones is, how do I get into D&D? Is it complicated? Do I need to be good at math? Things like that. All you really need is your imagination and a dice set. And even then, if you don't have a dice set, the DM probably will have them. You could even borrow them if you don't have them. Dice, as far as what's good, what's not, it's all really preference. I've got many dice. My favorite are my metal set here. I got that at a Comic-Con or something like that. Local game stores hopefully have them. If not, you can always go to Walmart, Target. Everyone's trying to get in on the D&D thing now. So definitely something you can do for pretty cheap. But dice, piece of paper, and a pencil. Your imagination. As far as character creation goes, I did a whole YouTube video on that. I'm not going to get into it because there's a lot. But needless to say, you pick something that looks like fun to play. I've shared a lot of different classes and races, and I'm going to be doing more videos on my YouTube. But Player Handbook has a bunch. The Volo's Guide I just showed you has some. Sword Coast Guide. There's a few side add-ons that also have them. But just pick something that looks like fun to play. Hopefully you're not with a toxic group or toxic player. They're like, oh, like those guys don't go well together. It's all down to personal preference and what you want to do. So you'll pick a race. You'll pick a class. You can roll for stats, or generally I recommend point buy. It's more fair. We found that people that do rolling for them cheat often, or when they do roll something bad in front of the DM, they basically hate the character and want to kill him until they can roll just a better character. So I definitely recommend point buy. It is a lot of times what Adventures League uses. So yeah. You'll pick your stats. You put them into 6 stats. There are 3 physical and 3 mental. And those stats are basically used for how you play the game. So, strength, dexterity, and constitution. And then intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And your DM will explain that to you. Don't get caught up too much in all of that. A DM will help basically guide you on how to play. I say just look at D&D as just you're basically playing a really good live action game. So you'll get to role play every aspect of what you want to do. A lot of games are trying to do that now. Dragon Age, Mass Effect, all the Telltale games where make choices, and what choices you do make a difference. Well, that's what D&D is, but 100%. It's every choice has an outcome, and you can choose all of them. There's not the 4, this is the lawful choice, and this is the evil choice, and this is the in-between, It's whatever you want to do. And as you play more, you'll learn how to kind of role play a character. But if you want, when you start out, just role play yourself. If you're not like, I don't know what my character would do, that's something you can do as a basis. What would I do in that situation? And just get into it and start rolling dice. That's all you really need to do. Don't get intimidated by it. 5th edition is super easy. They made it to bring people into the game. Yeah. So pick a race, pick a class, and get into it. It's that simple. Let's see. As far as for a DM getting into the game, a lot of people are nervous. I definitely recommend, if you're going to DM, to have played a few games as a player. But if not, you can jump right into it. It'll be intimidating, just because you haven't played the game, you don't know all the rules. But it doesn't mean you have to. If you want to do the DMing, if you want to tell a story, that's all the DM is doing. You're the storyteller. You're the arbiter of the world. So when a player says, I want to go check over that barrel, I want to go talk to that innkeeper, you basically decide what happens when they do that. And the reason that the DM kind of needs to have experience is because even if you're using like a from the book module, which I recommend when you start out, there will be a lot of things that are not in the book that players will want to do. And you basically have to make a snap decision like, all right, this is what happens. This is what happens. You can definitely talk with your players, kind of collaborate and be like, well, like I'm thinking this, but in the end, your word is law. Players shouldn't argue with you. They will, but they shouldn't. You're there to kind of basically facilitate the game. And I find that good players will recognize that and appreciate the time you're taking so they can play the game. And bad players will argue with you and try to make the game about them. I recommend not playing with those players. So as far as the game works, anything you choose is law, but make sure you stay consistent to that. One rule I always try to let people know as far as like, hey, I want to do this with my player. Well, yes, you can try to do kind of this outside the box stuff, but anything a player can do, that means a bad guy can do. Your minions, the monsters, can do that. And you'll often find that players won't like that because they want to be able to be the one that kind of bends the rules, but they will be very upset if your bad guys do that. So I definitely like rewarding, creativity, but I try to keep it within the bounds of the rules. And the reason is D&D has been play tested so much, and a lot of times when players are trying to do something outside the box, they're often trying to exploit the system. And if you let them do it once, it will go down a road of many exploitations. Will you let me do that? So I'm doing this again. And you can either retcon or just, that's how this session's going to go from now on. They're allowed to do this thing. Some things to keep track of as far as both DMs and players. Spell slots. That's kind of a big thing. Again, I did a YouTube video on that. But spell slots are basically, think of them as bullets. So you have X amount of bullets you can shoot out of your gun being spellcasting. And some casters are kind of called what's called half casters. It's like a paladin is a half caster, right? If you do any archetypes like a rogue fighter, any of these that get some spells, they will have less spell slots. And when you do a rest, oftentimes a long rest, but a short rest, you can basically refill your bullets. So make sure your players, with the exception of cantrips, when they cast a spell, say, hey, what level spell is that? Oh, I'm casting a first level. They'll say I'm upcasting it, which basically means some spells will let you spend a higher spell slot. You'll obviously have more level 1s than level 9s. But you can upcast it, and however many levels above the level of the spell, you get basically additional effects and damage. If they do that, they only burn the higher slot. So keep track of that. Make sure your players are remembering to mark those down. Same for abilities. Some are short rest, some are long rest. Paladins have smite slots as well. Some clerics and healing classes get X amount of healing points they can spend. So some things to be aware of. Some other Q&A stuff I have that people have asked me. Attacks of opportunity. Are they in the book? Attacks of opportunity are what's called an optional rule. Same with flanking. So I like to play with both. I think it makes the game a little more interesting. An attack of opportunity happens when a monster leaves a threatened melee square. Okay? So if you have a melee weapon and someone walks away from you, you can hit them. And then flanking means that if this works with a grid system. It's really hard to do in the theater of the mind. But if I've got the guy here and I've got the bad guy here, the player character and the bad guy, if one of them leaves this square to move 5 feet away, leaving out of a threatened square, so if I move around him, I'm still staying threatened. But the minute I leave that area, the player gets to make the attack of opportunity. Now that is with voluntary movement. So if I have Thunder Wave, if I have Push, if I have something that makes a guy move, the other person does not get to do an attack of opportunity. That's often a missed rule. What are some other rules? I'm just trying to think of some common questions we've had since no one's really asking me any questions here. I see some people are here, but no one wants to ask questions. That's fine. I can keep just covering stuff. But feel free to ask anything. Loot on bad guys. So a danger we find with letting players loot everything off the bad guys from what they have is, one, it slows down the game. Two, it can often backfire in the way that the players get lots of stuff and they can sell it. If you don't want to do that, all you have to do is say that the item is unsalvageable, or you can put that it has no value in the market. It's a used weapon, right? So if you're fighting a guy, though, like a big bad that has this weapon they're using, I will often let the players loot that, unless you have some story reason for it. If the bad guy got to use it, the player should get to use it. And that works the other way around. If you've got a player that has a powerful item and it gets stolen, you can definitely use that item against the player. But as far as loot goes, it'll often tell you what's on them. I play with quite a few kind of optional homebrew stuff that I've added to the game. So I added something that lets you actually loot and salvage, body parts, like a Minotaur's horn and, bits from the demon and things like that. And that basically gives more viability to the ranger class, anyone with survival, to basically get pieces and build stuff. Same with weapons. You can have them loot materials and try to build something, especially if you have an artificer. Be very careful with that. It will get out of hand. Players can cause problems. In the end, you can often just say, that's not balanced. Because a lot of people forget D&D is a game. So, just because you can do it in real life doesn't mean you can do it in D&D. You can award originality, but for example, one thing that I've often wanted to do, and I've seen why it doesn't work, is, for example, water. If I have a freezing or an ice spell, can I freeze the water and freeze everyone trapped inside the ice? Or if they're in water, do lightning. Does the lightning do additional damage because of the water? The danger with that is that, yes, it's awesome. I abuse it and I just murder all the monsters, right? And I'm like, this is so easy. We'll cast a water spell, we'll do a lightning spell. We'll cast a water spell, we'll do a lightning spell, right? Is that if I were to do that and I was to flood the chamber and have a blue dragon lightning, it would kill the party, right? And that's something that can happen, especially I've got spellcasters too, right? And so it goes down a slippery slope where you let players do it, then you let the bad guys do it. If you don't let the bad guys do it, then clearly the players are just going to run all over the board. Maybe you want to have a campaign like that, but I find that players get bored if they're not challenged, and players get bored if they kill everything, right? If it's up, the same thing again, we kill it, move on. Then what are you really doing, right? And I found often that the murder hobo players, the ones that often want to exploit the system and put everything together with the boulder trap that kills all the guys, you can do that maybe to help even the odds in a fight with a big army or something like that, and it worked that time. But if they start doing it a lot and it becomes more of a crutch, that's what you have to be careful with. Let me think. Some other questions that people often ask for players is, can I do this? Right? The can I do this question. And we're kind of touching on what I talked about before. But you as the DM might not always have the answers. And I kind of talked about this earlier where kind of consulting with your players. But can I do this is, I'm going to do a whole video on this, I think, on YouTube. But the can I do this question is what players will always ask. Like, whether they're newer players or veteran players, trying to come up with like a fun idea and do it, I definitely think that should be rewarded. I would balance it with this. First question, like I said before, if the players can do it, the bad guys can do it. Is everyone still okay? If that's the case, move on to the second question. Is this role-playing or is this trying to exploit something, right? And finally, the rule of cool. So the rule of cool, if it passes those first two, I don't start with the rule of cool because people will often do that. Oh, the rule of cool. I'm going to drop the chandelier and kill everybody. Oh, that was cool, right? Well, okay, next room. I dropped the chandelier. All right. You did that before. You're the chandelier guy, right? So that is the danger of it. So the can I do this question, ask yourself those first three, right? Are you okay with the bad guys doing it? Is it a role-playing opportunity? And rule of cool. And I generally find if you're not sure and the players aren't sure, roll a dice. That's what I'll do. I'll roll a dice and I'll be like, all right, on an 18 and above, this happens. And you can raise the difficulty of it based on how hard this thing is to do, right? So I'll be like, all right, you're an artificer, you custom built this sniper rifle, you've got a familiar spotting for you, your range is, a mile away. I want to snipe the bad guy and one-shot him, okay? So I'm like, all right, that sounds really hard. It's going to be an 18 plus or a 20 plus. So I roll 15. There's no modifiers to this. This roll is just, does this happen? And if it's something that you believe the player could control with skill, you could add a modifier to it. Like, hey, he's an experienced shooter. He's done shorter shots before in practice leading up to this. His dex is really good. Then yeah, sure, you can add your dex modifier, right? So just things like that, and do that. Let it be the one-time thing. He grievously injured that boss, but you didn't want to kill him. But definitely that's the way I handle those situations, and that's what I would recommend for both players and DMs. Next question. What happens when they kill my big bad? I have had times where you have, yes, you fell into my trap. It was I, Algazar, the wizard. And like as he's talking, this was supposed to be the introduction of the character, and the player's like, all right, we seal the room and fill it with killer bees, and counterspell all his teleports. And he's like, no, and he dies to bees, or something like that. And you'd have to basically cheese it and be like, he has 18 healing potions. He's drinking them one a turn, and something happens and he dies anyway, right? And you're like, oh. I don't know if you ever played Diablo 3, where Azmodan was like, haha, this is my champion. And then he'd die, and then you're like, of course he died. He wasn't the real champion. I feel like Azmodan was basically having to write new BBEGs in the campaign is what it sounded like. So, saving your big bad, should you do it? I don't like doing it. I think if the players manage to kill the big bad, good for them. Like, they killed the big bad. I don't really generally write campaigns or stories with, like, point A to point B to point C to the boss. And if the boss needs to be here, I don't do that. My campaigns I keep loose for a reason. I'm pretty good at basically ad-libbing. I've written stuff with contingencies. I have greater overarching story plot points for all the players that they may or may not discover, right? But I do that because players will never follow A, B, C, D. And as a DM, don't get frustrated by that because no player ever does. I've never had it happen. But that's kind of up to you. You can have the big bad actually be the lieutenant that they killed, and there's a bigger bad, which makes sense. And also, if they killed the big bad that easily, he wasn't that big, right? So those are just some things I do when it comes to if they kill the big bad. I am going to take an intermission here and grab some water, actually, because I'm talking a lot and I am parched. So I will be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Yeah, so just a little pause here. Grab me a drink. The rescue elixir. It's the elixir of the gods. Yeah. I shared this and put an ad and everything on Facebook. Trying to get some basically people in here to answer these. But maybe I'll just do it over Twitch in the future. Normally I get more engagement. But here we are. I'm going to do this for at least an hour, so let's keep going. No one voted on the poll. So I'm going to pause that for a second. Kind of take that down. So, questions. One other question that I think is pretty common that I get is, how do you get into writing a campaign? If you want to do your own campaign, where do you start? And for that, I have a few options for you. One of the things you can do, take a story you like and turn it into a campaign. I know it's not super original, but it's definitely something that you can do. And the reason to do that is basically a lot of the work's already done for you. It can be fun to retell the story or let people play inside that story. And sometimes if you don't let them know what the story is they're playing, they won't even recognize the story. So fun way to start if you don't want to write a lot. So that's option 1. Option 2, start with an idea. Definitely like they say the Simpsons method. Start with the end and work your way to the beginning as you write. Definitely something you can do. So let's start with this. So this is just off the top of my head. We've got Nagish here, right? So I've got Nagish, the evil pink beholder, right? He's trying to maintain the status quo. I've got a start. And the Dungeon Master Guide and Mordenkainen's has a way to like, hey, write your big bad guy. So start with that. Make the big bad guy. All right, now I have the big bad guy. Why does he do what he does? Well, we've rolled bonds on ideals. He's trying to maintain the status quo. So now the question is, status quo of what? Forgotten Realms in particular, I'm very familiar with. There's Greyhawk. There's Eberron. There's Ravenloft. There's other areas, but let's go with Forgotten Realms for this one here. Toril, right? I'm going to say, and all right, since we're helping you DM, we're not even going to use any of those. We're going to do our own homebrew world. So I'm going to do this. There's going to be 5 kingdoms, right, set up. And there's going to be a main center island, and there's going to be these other islands, right? And each of these islands, I'm going to say, is run by a beholder. So now I'm going to roll, and I'm going to roll 5 beholders. And this is going to be a world where these 5 beholders each are a different alignment. So if I don't get the one I want, I will pick what I want for bonds and flaws. Then I'll have the good beholder, right? That's random, but fun. So we have the good beholder. He's in one of the less known continents, right? In the upper right. He's in the ice continent. We'll have some theme with that too. You got an ice area, you got a forest area, you got a desert area, you got a volcanic area, and then you've got the main center land, which is your basic grasslands, basically here in the U.S., right? It's kind of got a little bit of everything. It's the big island. And that's going to be ruled by a covenant of beholders, a triumvirate, if you will. And we're going to have each of these beholders with different personalities, and it's sounding fun. I'm gonna write this down. So now I've got kind of the framework for the world. So the status quo, Nagish is going to be from pink and red. I like the theme. We're going to put him in the volcanic area, right, the bottom left. He kind of wants to keep the status quo. And so he's working with the other beholders to I guess, the Triumvirate, because they're the ones keeping order over the rules of this land. And then the other two beholders, they're going to be evil. There's going to be, I don't know. I'll roll for it, but we'll say the black beholder down here in the desert area, and we're going to have the blue beholder. The blue beholder will be the good one because that matches the ice theme. And then we'll have the green beholder up there, right? And those two are working to overthrow the Triumvirate. He's working to try to help keep the status quo. And the heroes in this area, they're kind of working with the good beholder. They want to overthrow and kind of bring good to all the realms and overthrow all the beholders, right? Back in the time, 1,000 years before, the kingdoms were ruled by the dwarves, in the mountain region, the elves in the forest region, the frost giants in the ice region, etc. They all had their own kings. The beholders, through subterfuge and commanding various armies, overthrew them. So now I've got my framework. Now I've got kind of what happened before, what comes for the future. Adventurers get recruited. We'll pick them to show up in the Centerland and kind of be hassled by the minions of the Triumvirate. And they will learn through the campaign, like, oh my gosh, beholders are ruling this city. Oh, look at this, because they're going to be outsiders, right? You can do that, by the way, or you can have them kind of know the background, whichever you like. I think it's kind of fun for players to discover, especially if you do a homebrew world, because this is kind of not what they're used to. It's a fun surprise. So we do that. We've got our pink beholder Nagish. Now we're going to come up with more specifics. So Nagish over here, he's got access to fire giants. He's got access to fire dragons. He's got access to all these things. He's, a very powerful beholder who commands all of these and has subjugated them through threats of, bribery, force, imprisonment, torture, banishment to, the Netherrealm, TM Mortal Kombat, to the Abyss, to the Void. And now I've got why he does what he does. So now from there, I'll build out and I'll go, all right, who are his lieutenants? It's always good to have some good second in commands, right? So I'll have a fire giant commander. I'll have a red dragon as his second in command. And then I'll have him using various groups, gnolls, ogres, goblins, kobolds. And I'll have these guys each bearing the mark of the red cat eye, right? And so they'll have it tattooed somewhere on their body or branded. And these guys are going to go out and try to mess with things in all the various regions. And the players will see this as they play. They're like, oh, look, there's that eye again. What's up with that? And they'll learn, oh, it's the workings of Nagish. And whatever, roll for a name, good beholder, says, hey, guys, let's stop this. Let's overthrow this. Help me out. Nagish is the main problem. The Triumvirate is sitting fat and happy and kind of arrogant. They're prideful. They're like, no one's going to overthrow us. We're the three most powerful beholders. We've got this big kingdom. They've got access to everything. We got Nagish helping us out. And so they're not really the problem. Nagish, though, is this active force to overthrow the rebellion. I could do this, and I could run a campaign all the way just them trying to get to and overthrow Nagish. And now once I've done that, all right, good. Now we've got this island and this one. And then you could have the next part tackling this one, tackling that beholder, or even using the two evil beholders that are trying to overthrow the Triumvirate with them. I mean, I'm not going to write that because that's up to the players. But now I've got a framework, and I know where to go from this. So then you have to start thinking, all right, what if they want to join Nagish? Always think of the players being problems, right? But maybe they want to. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe they like the status quo and they want to help Nagish. Do you, as the DM, basically make Nagish so unappealing that they decide not to do that. Or you're like, all right, screw it, let's go with it. Now I'm going to write them overthrowing the good beholder. And just going with it, where I have plans for each of these things happening. And that's, I think, a good way if you can do that to play, because it gives the players options and you're never backed into a corner. So that there was an example right there. I would go more into detail. If you want to, like, comment, be like, we'd love to hear more stories about the adventures in the Beholder Town, right? But that's an example for DMing. Definitely use the World Builder Journal if you want. It's something I think official with D&D that they released. Really cool. It's got a book, and there's stuff in the DM guide too for writing a city, writing a town, writing all this stuff. Lots of resources. If you ever want questions or advice, you can definitely write here, comment on the live stream here, comment on the Facebook page, comment on the YouTube, and ask some questions. I'd love to get a dialogue going. We're all about bringing people together, with all things tabletop. And D&D is one of my passions, and I'm definitely trying to get more people into the game, more people playing it. I think it's a great hobby. I think it kind of overcomes all social, economic, race, all these different boundaries that I think everyone can come together and play together. It doesn't matter who you are. I don't care if you are atheist or Christian or agnostic or Buddhist or, African American, white, Asian, Indian. It doesn't matter. Everyone can play D&D. That's what I like about it. I think D&D is going a little too far with kind of the woke culture. I think woke culture, and I won't get on the soapbox or anything on that, but I feel like that is not actually inclusive, the way that they're doing things. But I think D&D as a whole is inclusive. I think that everything they're doing with D&D to try to write dark elves not as evil and orcs not as evil and things like that. I mean, I think R.A. Salvatore a long time tackled that with Dritstorn being a good drow, but I think that was interesting because he wasn't the norm, I think that there can be in a fantasy universe, especially when you've got orcs that have the blood of Gruumsh, which is an evil god. There is good, there is evil. That's a truth. That's a truth in the world we live in. That's definitely a truth in D&D, where you've got gods of these various alignments. So I don't think we need to have, all races are all the gamut. They can be anything, because you could, as the DM, write a group of good dark elves or a good group of orcs, or an evil group of humans or whatever, that already existed. We didn't need to write rules for it, if that makes sense. And I think that's the same with, Candlekeep and what they've been doing, or they're like, hey, we're trying to be more inclusive with, wheelchairs and things like that. I think that can already exist. I don't think we need Hasbro and D&D telling us, hey, here's the module. I could write that. If I've got, someone that's in a wheelchair in my group and they talk to me and they're like, hey, I'd like to play a wheelchair character, you can definitely put inclusive things in there for people, I just don't understand why. I mean, I understand why. Hasbro is trying to virtue signal and bring in as many people as they can and be like, look, we care about all these different groups, which, I don't know. I feel like didn't need to be said. I never felt like D&D as a whole didn't care about those groups, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm blind. So if that's something you want to comment about, comment. I'd love to hear from other people on that. But yeah, when it comes to D&D, there are no wrong answers as far as thing goes for what you can do for your character or your world as a DM. Another question people have asked as far as miniatures goes is, hey, I want to do a cool miniature, but I don't want to pay Hero Forge prices. I don't even want to pay, in the store buy a $5 miniature price. That's fine. You can get these little, they're like caps almost, like circular. A word escapes me. It's basically a token, but it's just a piece of paper, right, on cardboard stock. Something that simple. Back when I played, way back in the day, I grew up poor. I had no miniatures. They didn't have all the stuff they have now, honestly. I used milk caps that I would tape on top a drawn picture of a monster or a guy. I mean, you can do that, and I don't feel like it takes away at all from D&D. I had a paper with a ruler that I'd drawn squares, and that represented the board, and the rest was just theater of the imagination. I played with that. I play with Fantasy Grounds now. I guess now the question is, what do you use? There are so many different programs. You've got Roll20, you've got Fantasy Grounds, you've got Tabletop Simulator. There's a lot of different resources for people to use. D&D Beyond. I use Fantasy Grounds. I like it. I've already paid money into it. I've kind of already talked about this before, but that's what I use to host for playing games. And I've now actually begun to professionally do D&D as kind of like a side hobby. So I do on Fiverr and book gigs and be like, hey, look, I'm a DM. I'm in this area. I'll DM for you or over the internet. So that's something else. Message me if you want that. I'm very familiar with 5e, but I can also DM Pathfinder and Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars RPG. I've actually run a few campaigns of that. Any other questions, guys? Please put them in the comments. Even later after the stream, go on the YouTube, go on the Twitch, message me, post on the Facebook wall. Questions you have. So, another big one, just thought of this. So, homebrew. What's allowed, what's not? Should I let them use homebrew? I would just use caution. D&D and all the stuff they have has been play tested. You wouldn't think so, but it has. They've put a lot of work into balance and making sure everything has a place. And even though some classes are just better, races are just better, all of them, are balanced pretty well. The danger with homebrew is people are very bad, especially when homebrewing for themselves, at reining in what's balanced and what's not. I have a brother who is famous for, I want to be original and write all my own stuff, right? And what it generally comes down to is he'll write something pretty broken. And he'll be like, hey, I talked with my friends. They all said it was balanced, right? That's what everyone says. They talked with somebody and it was good. Without having play tested, chances are it's not balanced. You can, as a DM, if all the other players are okay with it, let them try it. Let them run it, see how it works. But I find there will arise a situation, maybe not at first, where the combination of all the things they've got lets them do something, and you're like, whoa, what's that? And they're like, oh yeah, I've always had this and this, and when I combine it together, I can suck them into a vortex, rip their body in half, and kill them. Trask dead. So that's the danger of homebrew. The other danger is, even if they can't do crazy stuff, if the class is way better than the other players in the group will get bummed, basically. They'll be like, I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting around, I don't have a purpose. And they want to have fun. D&D needs to have fun for everybody. It's a cooperative game, it's a team game. It's not you versus the DM. It's definitely not I'm a better player because I get more kills. I see that all the time with some toxic players I played with, where it was all about just them doing the most damage, or killing the guy, or being the best. And they were just dealing with their own issues, I feel like, of not feeling like they were the best. But it made it not fun for others. And it also became to the point where they weren't really there to play and enjoy the story and role play. They were there to try to just kablam, door kick and kill things, which is what they call a munchkin. That's how that came to be. You just care about killing and murdering. You want that? Play the game Munchkin. What else? Rules as written versus rules as intended, aka RAW or RAI. So rules as written versus rules as intended. I always play with rules as intended. And the reason is people will look for loopholes and combinations with rules as written. It's like, oh, that's the way the rules are written. But guys, like, they meant this. And with that, again, you can vote with the table. I find generally 1 to 2 people might be, on the bloodthirsty side, especially if they're friends, partners, brothers. But if the group consensus is, hey, like, this is how it is, this is how it is. And you can Google, you can go to Reddit, you can go to Twitch. There's a lot of sources for pretty much any question you'd ask. They've got an answer there. Questions for good ways to get started. I did do that in a video, but get a dice set, get a character sheet, and start writing your guy. Don't pick the race and class. Write about the guy. You can roll bonds, flaws, etc. But decide, hey, this is the kind of guy I want to play. I want to play a Sherlock Holmes character. For example, one of my players, my brother, did that. He basically made like a Sherlock Holmes character. Not all about the fighting, not all about spellcasting, just Sherlock Holmes. Very fun, interesting character. He started as an NPC that we rolled. That he was like, that'd be a fun character to play. You can see just with the Nagish that I rolled there, like I started coming up with, like, oh, that would be fun to play. So start small and kind of add as you go. If you just do that and you show up and you're like, hey, I don't have a class, I don't have a race, but I have the idea of my guy. The DM will help you put stuff together. Talk with them beforehand. Please don't be the player that shows up at the table with nothing. Because other players show up ready to play and you have to wait. And that's kind of a bummer. So maybe talk with your DM, show up early, show up a different time of the week. But, not having your stuff ready to go is considered basically being a poor player. Some other things to note. Campaigns to start with. There's quite a few. I like Hoard of the Dragon Queen. It's easy. It's a good way to start. It follows a very linear structure. That's good. As a new DM, you don't have to have a bunch of answers. I love Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's been a blast. That's the one I've been playing right now. But it's huge. Each level of the tower is basically like a mini campaign because each level is big. So I've liked all the ones I've played. Ravenloft's been fun. Storm King's Thunder, Ghosts of Saltmarsh. So yeah, all those good points to start with. What else? Who else? I'm not sure. I think that covers quite a bit. Where to start, how it plays. I'm sure there's a lot more complicated specific questions, but they didn't get asked them, so easiest class to play. Play a fighter. Easiest class. You don't have to worry about spell slots. Fighters are very good. And there's not a lot you have to do. You hit stuff with your action surge. You hit lots of things. You have second wind. It's just hitting things, right? Now, are there subclasses within fighter that are more complicated? Yes. Is there a lot you can do? Yes. By no means is a fighter, boring. I think people can play that way, but it doesn't have to be. But fighter, good way to start. If you're doing a spellcaster, and you want to do stuff, I would do probably a sorcerer. And the reason is wizards have a lot more, so you can get overwhelmed. You can do a warlock. They have less to cast. They're almost like a half caster because they only go up to 5th level slots. You'll just be doing a lot of Eldritch Blast. But then they have the patron angle, and there's a lot more, I feel like, to that. But yeah, sorcerer. Good races to do for that. A fighter, you can be anything but be a human fighter, be a dwarf fighter, be an elf fighter. Human, dwarves, elves, pretty easy across the board for any of those things. Halflings get a charisma buff, again, depending on the halfling you pick. But you could do that and tailor it to what class you're picking. Tasha's has kind of changed things. Tasha's Cauldron is optional. Before everyone goes crazy, it's optional. You don't have to do it. But it basically lets you pick a +2 and a +1. Or a +1, +1, +1 for your stats. So, kind of fun, but it is optional. I think the pros and cons of the races are there to make your guys different. And I think that's why a lot of people have problems with Tasha's. Excuse me. That's about it. Guys, let me know in the future what you'd like to see more of. Comment, like, share, subscribe, all that. And let me know what you'd enjoy doing, what you'd enjoy knowing more about. I am going to start doing more of my YouTube videos again, now that I have my studio set up. And yeah. Let me know what else you'd like to see. I'm probably going to do one of these live streams once a week. This one, I didn't get a lot of engagement on, so I'm not sure if it's a viable option, but I'm going to keep trying it. I appreciate, as always, the likes on the page, on the Twitch, the subscribes. Definitely helps. I'm trying to make this more of a thing that I can devote more time to. So please, guys, tell your friends, tell people that want to get into D&D and tabletop gaming. I do painting tutorials. I do painting commissions. So let me know. But thank you all. Thank you for taking the time to check us out. And just keep in mind in the future where we are, PorcupineGamers.com, bringing people together with all things tabletop. We're going to be doing more D&D videos. We're going to be doing actually a small series covering 2 heroes from one of our campaigns, kind of role-playing it for the camera. But yeah, let me know, and thanks for watching. Take care.